All right, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming this morning. I hope you're enjoying All Things Open. My name is Jason Hibbets. I'm a community director at Red Hat for our digital communities team. I'm sorry, Lauren. And our team is responsible for working with several different communities. We have 4 web properties that we operate, maintain as platforms and communities. We have opensource.com, Enterprisers Project, Enable Sysadmin, and Enable Architect. And we're going to dive right in. So we'll start off with some quick introductions. So please tell us who you are, what community means to you, and we'll kick it off with AmyJune.
Because all of us use the software in different ways, and the more people you have contributing, the more diverse backgrounds they have, that's what builds a better product. So community really means everybody to me. And opensource.com in particular is because we're spreading knowledge and sharing knowledge about open source.
I'm Katie Sanders. I'm the Senior Content and Community Manager for the Enterprisers Project, which I might refer to as TED at some point throughout this. We're a community and online publication helping CIOs solve problems and drive business value. So for me, community is a place for thoughtfulness, advocacy, and attention. That's good? Okay. Yeah.
I'm Tyler Carrigan. I am the Senior Community Manager for the Enable Sysadmin community. And I would say community to me, I'm going to give a bit more of a technical definition because I think that what I've said so far. But I think community is about creating a space where community members can interact with not just you as the staff or the community manager, but also a place where they can interact with each other. And that's something that we will talk a little bit more about here in just a few minutes because it's a challenge that as new community managers or people who are in charge of community spaces that you'll definitely face. So we'll definitely be talking about that here soon.
All right, so I'm gonna try my best to talk over her. This is really slow. I'm Marjorie Freeman. I am the community manager for Enable Architect. Enable Architect, I like to say, is the baby of the team, and just because it's only been around for like 2 years, but I'm definitely in the growing, nurturing stage. And what I've learned about community is that it's a place for like-minded people a platform for like-minded people to network and talk and share more about things. In the case of architecture, I think it's really important because I had no idea what systems architecture was until I became a community manager for Enable Architect. So I think it's a great place to raise more awareness about the practice.
Okay, so we got a couple of prepared questions that we're going to go through, and then we want to leave some time for audience questions as well. First up, Marjorie, we start with you. What are some practical tips for sharing, managing, and growing a community?
I would say building trust. Having the younger community and one of the more, I'd say, nuanced communities, it's important to, since I'm not a technical stakeholder in the architect community, it's important for them to know that I have their best interests at heart. I want to learn more about them. I want to spread more awareness around AEA practice. So for me, that looks like just creating touch points with them, checking in regularly, letting them know, and you'll hear us say contributions a lot, and in our case, it's articles. So letting them know how their contributions are impacting their community, whether that's page views or engagements on social media. Just letting them know that I have their best interests at heart, is how I nurture my community, and with under as far as managing it, I'd still say really trust, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's key. You have to be able to do that with your communities. So I think that's the reason that a lot of places that are trying to spin up new communities around open source projects, like they're looking for developer advocates. They're looking for people who can speak the language of their community members. And so something that's really interesting about the four sides that we represent is that we kind of speak to individual audiences with some overlap. But I definitely think that, you know that as far as that being able to establish the trust that we're all there for kind of the same reason, the same passions, and also that like if maybe you're not as technical as someone else in your community, but like having a safe space for people to learn from community members is like one of the most valuable parts about joining a community like this, is that you can kind of feel like knowledge gap the experts around you.
And we're not a marketing community, we're a technical community. Meaning we don't put people together to sell an idea. We're selling insights and knowledge directly from the people involved in the community.
At no cost.
Yeah,
You don't have to sell it.
Yeah.
All right.
I was going to add in something that is unique to the enterprise and private community, which is that we work with PR people. And so part of that community and building trust there is that I get a lot of pitches that are not relevant, but I always take that as a lesson to not just teach, but help the PR person understand, like, well, this isn't the right fit for us, but this is what is the right fit for us. So join our mailing list, and you'll learn what is the right fit for us. So I take it as an opportunity where it was like when I was a PR, people would just say no and not give me advice for feedback. But I always try to offer feedback because that's only going to help, because I've had people who pitch me stuff that's not relevant, and then they learn after being on our mailing list for a while what is relevant, and then they bring me authors who can write stuff that does work for us. So I always take that, and that's sort of how I build trust too, with a different type of part of the community.
Because if we're going to change gears a little bit, this one's going to be a fun one. We debate this all the time. We'll start with you, AmyJune. What's the difference between an audience and a community?
Thanks for the permission. Engagement is a hard one to measure. Engagement isn't about how many articles or how many code contributions people make. Engagement is about how we all work together. And so an audience is that non-participatory level. Maybe your audience is reading the discourse but not contributing to any of the conversations. Or they're part of the writers list but they never have any impact. They never write anything, they never have any ideas. They're invited to the calls but they don't come. When they're doing code reviews, they're doing just the smallest contribution possible to keep them on the team. So that's really more the audience level, where the engagement is not me with my community, but it's the community within the community. So we have one tool that I use is a writer's list where I send out writer's prompts. And I can tell it's successful because all of a sudden the conversation happens organically around, and it's just not me talking to one person and one person talking to me. It's Chris Hermanson talking to Jim Hall, and they get together and someone else chimes in, and now there's an article. So it's really about engaging all aspects of your community and making sure that you have tools where people can contribute easily, readily, and then turn it off as they want to. Because it's okay to go from engagement to audience to engagement. Because we all kind of have our things that we do, and giving them that permission to do that as well, letting them know that they can flow in and out of the community, I think really helps them engage in the community and feel safer.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. So no, I think you nailed that. It reminds me of the orbit model, right? Where you constantly have people who are really, really involved, and over time, those people, for various reasons, they may slip out to where they're just reading or they're following along with whatever type of community that you have. And that's something actually I don't know that we stated out front, but like a lot of communities, right? They're making code contributions. Like our sites, we are kind of knowledge sharing platforms, and so the contributions generally that like metric is like people share their experience or their knowledge with us. We turn that into an article and publish on our website for other readers. So that's, I think, technically where my mind goes when we talk about the difference between audience and community is like the people who engage with our content via Google or via a search engine, right? Because they're interested in finding it. That's an audience to me. Whereas the people who I go to when I have a question about something that is within the scope of our community, or people that are just really excited to talk to one another and share that knowledge and hang out in our community spaces that we create. Those are more the community members. So that would be the kind of the definitive line.
And also, engagement in audience has to be intentional too. If you feel like you have more of an audience, you do need to go out and you do need to do that engagement. It might not feel organic at first, but going out there and reaching out and being like, hey, there's this video I saw on the Commodorian, it's really funny, and spark something away from what the contribution is. It's really about nurturement. And the more our communities are nurtured, the more it's a community versus the audience as well.
I was telling some of the team after the workshop before we sat down to do the talk that I was working last night, and it was me playing video games with some community members and hanging out and having a good time. And I mean, it really does build relationships. So while I'm not on the clock, right, like that's time for me to interact with people. And yeah, I mean, it's not, hey, what articles are you working on, right? Like it's not necessarily like task-based, it's just like building rapport with people. So before we move on, I'm genuinely curious, how many of you out there are in some type of community role or involved in that sort of thing? Okay. I was just literally wondering, looking out at all the faces here. Yeah, no, exactly.
All right, well, the next question is around programming. So, Katie, we'll start with you. Tell us about any programs you have in your community and how they encourage community engagement.
So for TEP Enterprise Project, we have, I guess, like 3 tiers of contributors. We have our enterprisers, it's usually a CIO from a big company, typically a strategic customer for Red Hat, and they're usually doing something especially innovative in IT. So we invite them, we interview them, we ghostwrite their articles sometimes, and it's essentially by connecting them back to sales and insights. And then we have those are enterprisers. And then we have our C3 community, which is a mouthful of community contributor collaborative. And that's a smaller group of consultant types who have big CIO circles that they interact with. So they have like their finger on the pulse of what CIOs are caring about. And we basically took some of our most engaged contributors, our most reliable, the ones who love to write, who are always reaching out to us, and created this program where they write a certain number of articles per month. We meet monthly, they get to share ideas, they get to learn from one another, they get to help one another. One of our members just helped another member get a new job as a recruiter. So, and then we also will bring special opportunities to that group. So just this week, we arranged for 2 of the members to be interviewed for an episode of our Red Hat Compatible podcast. So they'll get some like perks or swag, stuff like that for being part of the C3 community. And then we have our broader network of contributors, which is, like I spoke about earlier, the PR people, and then just regular contributors who cold outreach to us and say, I want to write for your site. And we usually put them into the mailing list, and then every month or sometimes more, I'll send out headlines. So we do get pitches, and I'll review those. But the better thing that we get to do is that I get to create a list of headlines that are tailored to our specific interests at that time, and we send that out to the list, and then they claim the ones they want. And so a lot of times I'll have one headline that 5 people want to write on, and I'm able to usually turn that into 5 different articles. But so those are our groups, and we do different things with each of them, but they each have a special way that they're nurtured into our program. For the PR people, obviously, they're getting exposure for their clients, but their clients are experts who have knowledge to share, and they're providing our readers with actionable takeaways that they can implement to their IT organizations. So it's a win-win relationship in that aspect. And then the benefits for the enterprisers and the C3 are a bit more clear.
Naval Architect is in a very unique stage that I'm in a kind of a brand awareness phase right now. Trying to learn more about the community and their needs. And so, while I don't necessarily have established programs, I kind of let my community lead the way through their engagement. So, a lot of times you'll see an article just pop up randomly on LinkedIn like a year ago, and that's just because somebody read it, it got likes and comments on LinkedIn, and then you'll see stuff kind of resurface, and then as a community manager, I'm like, okay, well maybe that's a topic that I probably want to explore more with my community, and I'll approach community members that I interact with a lot more and be like, hey, can we go more of this content? Should we have discussions around it? Just kind of use the areas where there's the most engagement to continue building on. And then in the future, I could use this area that I know people tend to have more interest in to build a program. So, for instance, I a lot of times partner with TEP in a writing project. And right now, TEP is closing out the Day in the Life series, where it's just a look into people's roles, the ins and outs of their jobs, hard and soft skills. And again, that's another way for me as a community manager to learn more about the people I'm trying to serve. But it's also a way to spotlight the individual practitioners in the architecture scope in general. So there are different ways to use the community to glean information and learn how to better tailor things to them. But we can also use that as a way to interact.
For opensource.com, we have tiers too. Of course, we have writers that write prolifically, and then others that appear once a year or so. But for our core writers, we offer them tools to engage with each other. There are discourse forums. We're on weekly calls where we all get together and chat nerdy things, and it's some place for them to talk about interests that no one else in their life really wants to talk about. So it's a great value to them. And then because they're trusted authors, their publishing order is a little bit different. They don't have to stand at the back of the queue, which is kind of nice. So these little tiny perks add up to a lot to the correspondence. And they can float in and out. And then we have, the swag that we send to people who write us a few articles, some incentive to just, let them know that, hey, thank you, here's a water bottle for writing us 3 articles that got, 23,000 views, So we always reward with tangible, and that just hanging out too. And I think really on that correspondence level for us, that hanging out is the most valuable thing a lot of them have.
Sorry, I was just going to say, AmyJune has really taken all of us. I don't want to speak, but she has taught us a lot about community management. And one of the things that I love about her approach is she's very hands-on and one-on-one and personal. I got a postcard in the mail a couple months ago just saying hi. But she also sent it out to her correspondents. And last night they had dinner, and I got to meet all of them. And I was just so amazed at how relaxed it was, and everybody was just talking to each other. And one of the contributors, Don Watkins, was saying, I'm just so happy to be here and just be in the presence of the people that I work with every day. And that to me is the ultimate end goal for community.
And I want to say something about those postcards. I genuinely love getting mail. And so for me, when you like to do something, you like to do things for other people. But those postcards, sending them those correspondence, more times than not, the correspondents will write and they'll say, I loved that you went to that place. I love that you sent me a postcard. Check your email, there's an article in there. So it's one of those things. It's they got this postcard that makes them happy, and they're happy when they write. And so it's those little things, it really is those personal touches that keep that program alive.
And Donna's written 259 articles.
Yep.
Yes.
AmyJune, if we need some extra mail, I'll just blow your flyers. Tyler, you want to talk about sewers real quick?
Honestly, I think there's other questions that we have to jump into, like tools.
Yeah, we'll get there. All right, Next question we have, AmyJune, we'll kick it off with you. What are you doing specifically, and this is raining obviously, to make your community more diverse, equitable, and inclusive?
Okay, so I'm going to air dirty laundry because I don't care. When I first started opensource.com and you open up the page view, it's in Drupal, so it's a view. It's all a bunch of the same looking kind of faces from the same area writing articles, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. But first, there's no one that looks like me on there, and we all have these stories, right? So one of the things I sort of centered on in my first 6 months is how do I get authors from different communities, meaning location, different communities, meaning diverse backgrounds, and different topics. Because yeah, sure, the Linux topics do well, but there's only 2 articles on accessibility. Well, accessibility is important to me. Drupal's important to me. Why aren't there articles on opensource.com? So the diversity part was intentional. You know, everyone complains that there's this lack of pipeline, but you need to make that pipeline. You need to go out and you actually need to invite people into your community. So there was a Nigerian open source summit that was happening. It was virtual. I wasn't able to attend, but I reached out to these people who I wanted to see articles from. They were new developers, you know, they're from Africa. And every single person I wrote and asked to write an article wrote one because no one had ever asked them to do something like that before. Yes, the articles were a lot of work for us to work with because English wasn't their first language, or they were junior developers and we had to help them with the tech. But for us, that intentionality was really important. But along those same lines of having a diverse, the diverse community, you need to focus on that inclusion part. And the inclusion is also something I worked on in that first 6 months because we want to make sure that the people who are part of our community feel safe. Because sometimes when you're from those marginalized and excluded communities, there's this psychological safety. So we rewrote our code of conduct to be more inclusive to more diverse communities, and that was quite a project. Opensource.com had the same code of conduct for forever. So we were intentional in making sure that we have this space where it's very lined out. We built it on like the Apache and the Drupal and the Django, if that's how you say it, codes of conduct. You know, so we pulled in from a bunch of groups. So that was our thing. Is it was very intentional. And there was one point, Lauren, she's our managing editor, took a page of our view, and there was someone from each continent on the page that day. And that's spectacular, you know. I just love that. But again, you know, reaching out because just because we don't have an article there or we don't have that community doesn't mean we won't publish for them, but people might think that, oh, the content is irrelevant. So reaching out to people and making sure that they know that they can submit something. But it's really that intentionality that we've been working on open source.
I'm also again in a unique situation of being architect because I guess same tech. The audience, most of them are in a senior level position, but that doesn't mean that they have learned all there is to learn, and they know everything. But they got there for a reason, and I think that when you're in a position to create change or impact, I'm not going to say it's your responsibility, but you should inspire the people that are trying to do the same as you, support the next generation of, in this case, architects, engineers. And as a Black woman, I do not relate into nearly as many Black senior software engineers and architects as I should. And I know that there are Black and brown senior level practitioners out there. So on a personal level, I feel it is my responsibility here on the platform to do all I can to share their stories. And when I do find someone to encourage them to share theirs, I was asked in an internal employee resource group if I could help write up an interview that a student was doing for a senior software engineer. And I mentioned the Day of the Life series that I'm creating, but I was like, that's a perfect opportunity for me to spotlight this role and give the student an opportunity to view his personal chart. So I wrote up his notes from his interview with this person. And this article he can use to add his resume, he can use it to populate his LinkedIn, and you don't know what that is going to do for him in his career. That might be the stuff he needs to go out and talk to other people. It's just little incremental things, I think, that pave the way for diversity and inclusion. And it shouldn't be my responsibility, but since I have the flash orders, I'm gonna do all I can to change.
Oh, I want to talk about equity in our programs too. This is something we're experimenting with because we have these like solid guidelines of, write 10 articles a month. Well, what if you're on maternity leave or you got sick with COVID? So we're thinking about changing these programs to be more equitable for things like that. That way, like you do at work, you take a long sabbatical at work, you don't lose your job, you come right back to where you're from. So that's something we're working on to make our communities more equitable too, because we found that our members of core writers' gender really shifted during the pandemic as some people moved into caregiving roles, children at home, not having the time to write. And so we had some women drop off the program because they didn't fit in. And so that's not very fair. And so like this year we're working on that equity thing, making sure that if you have those sort of guidelines that you're malleable and you can bend them and really make it a good experience, because we want people to come back too, and that's the thing is if you have this exit strategy that feels bad, you don't want to come back to something, so we want to have that experience of dropping off and taking a break be something that isn't a burden, and there's always that welcome community when they come back.
So that actually, we implemented that earlier in 2022 because I was noticing the same thing. Like we generally, I would say, don't have a ton of women in our community, but the ones that we do have done really, really great work. We want to keep them in there. But yeah, exactly what you said. Like during the pandemic, I noticed that numbers started to fall off, and it was either okay, I can be rigid and say, all right, we didn't hit your numbers. And truthfully, like I had initially leaned towards, let's just have one rule for everyone, and I don't want to like play favorites. But then as we started looking at it, it was like, okay, well, let's see what happens if we lower the barrier to entry just across the board. It doesn't have to be just for one group. We can lower the barrier to entry to this. And the thing I was worried about, which was now all of a sudden I'm going to have all these additional people join these groups, and we're going to be like overloaded with people in these core contributor groups, is that the people who wanted to participate, which is really the people I want in my community, participated. And the people who didn't, like they are rotating out maybe as audience members and things like that, but there was no downside at all to lowering that barrier of entry. We were able to keep people who were actually really excited about communities, but who weren't able to necessarily put the time in during 2022. So I highly encourage you all, if that's something that, you're looking at your communities and saying, we don't have the right number of these people or this group or whatever it is, maybe look at lowering the barrier to entry, because it may not have the negatives that you assume would come along with it. I certainly learned a lesson there. So.
We did a similar thing with C3, where every year we reevaluate. So we changed it from just when I started 2021 to 2022. Excuse me. We changed it to a certain number of articles, and now I'm even further reevaluating because I have a couple of members who don't really love to write, but they send me a ton of people who write, and they're always really great articles. So I'm like, I'm not going to kick you out. First of all, we're not really going to have to kick people out, but I don't want to say that you didn't meet you didn't write 3 articles in this quarter, so you can't write anymore. It's like this person is doing something, is helping our community in another way. So changing those metrics or barriers of requirements to be part of the community is important to reevaluate all the time.
I would say the only thing, just like in that vein, and then we're able to move on, because I know we have to is just make sure that, like, if that's the decision you choose to make, that it's clearly communicated to everyone in your community.
Yeah.
Because if not, then you obviously can potentially cause some friction between community members going, hey, I know that this person did right, and I wrote 15 this year, like, why are they in the group? So it's definitely ideal to communicate that stuff openly and clearly to everyone.
We've got about 10 minutes left, so we're going to ask one more question, and then if you all have questions, we'd like to get to as many as possible. So maybe lightning round with this question. What tools do you use to work with your community?
Yeah, I'll jump into this. So I had a kind of a passion project where, like we were talking earlier, you need to create a space for people to be able to interact with each other, and not just with you as staff or the community manager or whatever it is, right? Like that whole, like, imagine a mesh network, like that's the idea for your community. But one of the things that I think was a huge takeaway for me is you want to go where your community members already are. Like, try not to create another app or another thing they've got to download or pop open or whatever it is. You can go to a space where people are already using this tool. That's really ideal. And so my quick little example of this is that right before I went on maternity leave late last year, right before that, we spun up an instance of Discourse, which is this open source kind of Reddit forum thing for the sysadmin community, and it went really well. But due to a couple of exterior circumstances, we weren't able to keep that running. So that went away, and I honestly had like a little bit of a hard year coming back to work because I didn't have a space for my community to interact with each other. And that, I mean, as a community manager, and those of you who manage communities, you know, like, you're not getting that like quick touch points, the non-formal stuff, right, where everything's over email. It doesn't feel as good. But I don't know. I had a tough year with that. So my goal was to spin up a new space, and I did Discord, which is not open source. Sometimes it's not a popular option, but most of my community was already they're there, and they're pumped about it. They love it, and we've been able to interact with people casually. Like, all of the functions of the email stuff I could send over DMs. People love being able to interact with each other quickly and get answers to things quickly. It allowed me to do things like, hey, I'm going to be in chat for the next hour if you guys want to drop by for like office hours, or just to ask questions, or honestly just to hang out, whatever you want to do. But it's been amazing. Like, my community has literally, like, the engagement level has just come alive since we got that up and running. So I would just highly recommend whatever tool you use, try and go to where your community members already are, because it's that much easier for them to be involved.
And I want to put that to tools that help us manage the community on the backside, because we all have metrics. We have to perform at a certain level, And so most of us use Drupal as a content management system, and Drupal sends out RSS feeds to a CRM we use called Savannah, where we measure different things. So I use Drupal, Savannah, and spreadsheets to keep track. And the spreadsheets are more for the things that we not quite sure we want to measure yet, but we might want to measure in the future. Those like, hey, Dawn referred Lauren, and those kinds of things that we don't quite have a space for. But measuring those metrics and keeping notes as you do things, like every time I send a correspondent a postcard, I write it in Savannah in my notes section that I sent them a postcard to such and such, because I don't want to send them another postcard next time I go to Maryland. I want to send them a postcard when I go to Colorado, so it keeps it, because you can't keep track of everything, but I want to be intentional, so, making sure keeping notes and having a reasonable space to have them is important. It's important to utilize the tools that you have.
Yeah, Savannah's especially important for me with working with PR people, because the author is the one who's filtered in through the RSS feed with their name. But if I'm not working directly with them, I need to know who is my contact to get a hold of them. And that way, if I ever were to go somewhere else, leave it, whatever, somebody could jump in and have all those relationships curated, ready to go. Like, oh, there's the community of contributors right here in Savannah. So it's helpful.
It's huge.
Yeah.
All right, audience questions?
Sorry, go ahead.
So I'm curious about building a community within your own company, right? So how do we keep the engagement on? For example, we created a Java user group. Initially there was a lot of engagement, a lot of people brought in ideas, wanted to represent it, but eventually it just tapered off. How do we keep the engagement on, bringing new ideas, do you use speakers? Like how do you get messages on that?
So the question is, they have an internal community, how do you keep momentum and activity going? Yeah.
I think that's one of the hardest things is like when you're starting, is trying to keep it moving. But things that I would suggest is giving people a place to kind of showcase like their involvement. I think is one of the things that draws new members in, because they want to be able to show off the work that they're doing and the things that they're involved in. And then also, I would say just like making sure that the communication is high. So even if you're really pumped about the Java user group, right? And you notice like, hey, this is kind of falling off, find some little way to like try and spark it back off, right? Whether it's an article that you read or something cool that you've been working on, a question that you want answered, but like some way to start that conversation up. But yeah, I definitely would recommend maybe WordPress or something. Like, I don't know, figuring out a way for people to like share what they're doing in a way that can be showcased to the rest of the members, because I think that people love that type of recognition. That's something that I think was built into all of our communities. I don't know if we spoke to generally, is just like creating kind of some incentive programs and that sort of things to get people involved. So that would be my recommendation.
Also sharing the impact of their work.
Yeah.
How they wrote this piece of code that impacted this piece of code and that kind of thing. With articles, it's a little bit easier. We can say we had this many this many page views. But sharing those statistics and having them know the impact of their work, or if you had someone email you, oh, that piece of code did X, Y, and Z, and making sure you share that with the contributor who did that piece of code. Really nurturing, and we all like kudos. We all want to feel good about the work that we do.
I would also say like problem solving. So if there's an issue one person is having, they can bring that to the group. That's a lot of different perspectives that they can get. So that's why like with the C3 community, just even with like the job, somebody came in and was like having trouble figuring out where I want to go next, and somebody has advice. If we have an article coming out, it's this like 6 C's of career hunting or whatever. So, but yeah, trying to solve a problem with this like smaller group of people that might have encountered that problem previously and have advice to offer. So.
And at first, engagements can be difficult because no one wants to be that first person that writes in the forum. And so having a model participant member, encouraging someone, like I go in there and ask a question, it's like here, sometimes when you give public speech, you have a friend come in that asks the first question because no one else wants to ask the first question. Having that model community member helps. And just having a conversation with someone, hey, I want to start doing this, or having Marjorie come into the forum and ask a question and do that. It's that sometimes that the first one is the hardest for people. So.
Building on what AmyJune said, having a influential stakeholder. I have actually AmyJune is a huge advocate for the entire, I would say, digital communities. He is a chief architect at Red Hat, and he loves taking the articles, breaking them down on LinkedIn, and tagging people, and starting a conversation, right? So get people talking about it, getting people excited, and that's the kind of person that would, in the case of a Java user group, he'd be like, hey, I'm in Raleigh this weekend. Do you want to meet up with the people in the group local to Raleigh? Like finding somebody that is willing to start the conversation, facilitate it, and use his or her network to help build up engagement.
Yeah, that kind of segue right into mind is how do you encourage community members to interact directly with each other so that you're not at the center of that, how do you initiate those?
Use those.
So the question is, how do you encourage community members to interact with each other, not having the community manager be the center point, focal point for all the conversations?
So I definitely can. I mean, I'm not putting myself down, but I cannot speak. Yeah, I cannot speak to systems architecture. I love listening about it, listening to it. But
For me, I do a writer's list once every 10 days or so, and I tell my story. Hey, I went and did this, and I don't know this, and wouldn't it be great? Whatever. I have a little story, and it's a writer's prompt. I'm not looking for an article for it, but people will be writing, and there's a lot of engagement. So I was like, what do you have on your laptop? And so people were like shipping me pictures of the stickers on their laptop. And that was like 47 threads, you know what I mean? Or 47 comments, you know. Finding something fun, not always work related, really helps. And then we have that forum of discourse where authors would come in and be like, oh, did you hear about X, Y, and Z open source thing? And then people will start the conversation. So the tools are really important too. But I usually just spark the conversation and then I let it go from there. And once it sort of tailors off, I'll like maybe if I want to hear something else, I'll say something. But really, like having that trusted community together, you know, that they all kind of know each other because the group is small. But again, having those tools, that writer's list and discourse for them to have that space to engage with each other.
For those of you who have technical communities, I would say like this is like the community version of clickbait, right? You can literally pick something that you know is almost inflammatory, like versus Emacs to go, right? People are going to yell at each other nicely, hopefully, if you've garnered a lot of trust in your community, right? But when we've done things like that, where we've done like versus battles around just like a technology that you know people are really passionate about, and that's worked really well. The other thing that I would say about having a technical community, kind of back to what you're talking about with Java user group, is like we all love troubleshooting, whether we admit it or not. Like people love to solve problems. I don't want to be responsible for ticketing, but I'm happy to help you with it, right? I think that sort of stuff is great. If you're just like, hey, I was trying to do this new thing on my laptop. Like one of the things that happened for me is I got a new Linux machine in, and I'm trying to get rid of a corporate issue such and such so that I can run Fedora on my laptop. It's something I really wanted to do, but that's not something I had ever done before. And so I could go to Stack Exchange or whatever and pull the stuff up, but it was just as easy for me to reach out to one of my community members and say, hey, if you've got a few minutes, I'd love some help with this. And all of a sudden, I've got like 10 people in there, like, oh, did you try this? Like, yeah, definitely, you know what I mean? So it's just a way to build engagement, specifically, with technical communities, because people love to share their knowledge. So I would recommend that you pick something that you know people aren't going to be mean about, but like they're really passionate about, and that'll start up a conversation really quickly for sure.
I'll just add, I think that's the definition of success. When your community members start to talk to each other, your manager, yeah, think that, but I believe it. And when I was building a .com community a year ago, the first time I found out that like Don was talking to Chris, I was like, oh, that's magic, and that's so cool. Anyway, we're out of time. We're going to make some room for the next session. Thank you for attending. We'll hang out tomorrow.